How to achieve stretch goals with the people you are coaching. Let's get into it. Great coaches coach their players to go beyond where they normally stop. You know, when we look at creating and designing the game of coaching, we start with, what are we doing here? The person we're coaching starts to express that. You know, why is the coaching relationship important? And then we define what success looks like. And then we ask, how can we measure that success? The next step really in being a great coach is then inviting the person you're coaching to think beyond what they've currently thought, to think beyond perhaps what they already see as possible, to think beyond the measurements that they put in place that measure their success. You know, for most of us, when we think about goals, we can only see what we can accomplish from our current reality. But great coaches help people shift their current reality so they could see new pathways to achieve even bigger results. Some coaches fall into a trap, however, in this conversation. You know, lots of coaches talk about, go bigger, you can do more. You know, work harder, go bigger, use more leverage, whatever the term is. That's all fine from a stretching your thinking kind of conversation. However, ultimately in business, we have to land on something with the people we're coaching or the teams that we're coaching that still has a string of logic coming backwards from that stretch thinking. So for goals to be effective and for people to actually change behavior or work on something differently, that goal needs to they need to perceive that goal as doable, right? It may be a stretch, but there's that fine tension between pie in the sky, never gonna happen, Pollyanna kind of vision or goal setting, and actually this is great. What we just decided as a stretch goal is something I'm inspired by and I can see I can take new actions in. So great coaches listen for that sweet spot between what their coachee comes into the relationship thinking is possible. The coach allows them to think just beyond that point, but not so far out in the ether that they lose touch with reality. Because if what they've decided is a stretch goal doesn't have logic in the coachee's mind, meaning logic like they can start to see, or if I do this, if I do that, you know, I don't have all the answers to get there yet, but if we did this resource and if you coach me through it because you've been there before me, I actually see that I could get to that stretch goal. And that's inspirational. That's aspirational. That's something I can get to work on. That's something that I can organize my day-to-day inside of, right? That's very different than we have this big vision that people talk about once and then no one does anything with until the next big meeting or the next coaching session. You've got to have the goals that you have your people stretch inside of make sense to them. And until they make sense to them, they won't act on them. And we need them to act on them if there's any performance that will show up on the scoreboard and in the goals and objectives of the organization that they're a bigger part of. One way to introduce the conversation of stretch goals with the people or teams you're coaching is to be able to ask, what are the big milestones along the way? You know, what are the big victories along the way? So they set their goal, which they see as possible, and then you start to map out where would we be at what point along that journey where we could stop and say, congratulations team, you know, we've accomplished this victory inside the bigger game. You know, you can't win the championship with one game, but along the way, we'll win enough games which we see the championship becomes possible. You've got to do that thinking with the people you coach too and say, a month from now, what does accomplishment look like? What would be a milestone worth celebrating? Once you've identified the big wins along the way to the goal that they originally set out, often what can happen is they get a new sense of confidence, and that logic that I talked about starts to show up for them in a way that they could be open to a conversation about stretching the end goal, stretching that outcome, because they actually see, oh, if this domino fell and this domino fell and this domino fell, we would actually accomplish that goal 6 months from now or a year from now. They get the logic, there's clarity, there's confidence. The brain can see a clear pathway towards the fulfillment of the big goal. Then you're magic as a coach, because you can start to ask, now, is the outcome we created, back at step 1, is the outcome we created in our coaching relationship, is it inspiring enough? Is it big enough? Not because bigger is better, but because whatever it is you're committed to, if we could expand that result, what might it look like? Are you interested in it being expanded? And they'll look and examine that, and the answer will be yes or no. Ultimately, I will do what the person I'm coaching wants to do, because again, I don't want to get too much of me into their plan. This is their life, this is their plan, this is their business, not yours. They got to live with the results. So I want to listen for the results and the logic that they're inspired by actually acting on. I'm more committed to that than having somebody just say, I'm going to go bigger because I want to make you happy, coach, or because it's the right thing to say, or everyone should 10x, okay? That doesn't work. That actually can backfire and disempower the person or the team that you're coaching, because now they're more resigned. Why? Because they're inside this goal or accomplishment that is disconnected from their current reality. So they stop working on it, they withdraw from it, and they'll actually start resisting your coaching because, again, there's a disconnect. But do the work with the people you're coaching to invite them to expand their thinking, to stretch their goals, but ultimately land on something that they can be responsible for going after.